We are talking the 2019 remake of RABID. This one is directed by the Soska sisters, and of course this is a remake of the 70s Cronenberg movie, and this stars one-time Supergirl Laura Vandervoort. And I would best describe this movie as Zoolander with zombies. So, Zombielander, maybe? So anyway, let's discuss the plot here. So we have this, Laura Vandervoort's character is called Rosie, Rose, sorry, and she is a want-to-be fashion designer. She's kind of like a little bit of a kind of a mouse, a little bit of a wallflower, and she's kind of getting overshadowed at her kind of fashion job. And the movie opens with this weird kind of like, it's like Zoolander-esque fashion sequence with kind of really OTT characters and things like that. And we learn that basically Rose, like I said, is some type of like a wallflower. And it's one of those cases where, you know, it's the pretty ugly girl that we've seen taking the mick off in movies like Not Another Teen Movie. You know, it's one of these girls who wear glasses and hasn't discovered foundation and things like this, but really she is just, you know, an attractive woman. But there you go, Hollywood, what we're going to do. And she gets into a horrific accident which massively disfigures her face and her abdomen. And she is taken to this experimental clinic where she's given some stem cells kind of technology. And she's told this is kind of an experimental procedure, and essentially they kind of want to use her as somewhat of a guinea pig. And it appears to not only bring her back to full health, but even make her better. And now she doesn't need glasses and wears full makeup, and therefore is massively beautiful, and everyone's kind of commenting where they didn't before. However, it seems to give her this insatiable need for blood. And whenever she inadvertently kind of, and sometimes she'll kind of go into like these violent rages and bite people, which ultimately then kind of makes them have a kind of a super, well, we're told it's kind of like, first we're told it's like rabies, then we're told it's kind of like flu, but there's scenes where it kind of goes beyond that, I would say. But ultimately it kind of creates, like, if you've ever seen 28 Days Later, it kind of creates something like rage zombies ultimately. And, you know, she's kind of blacking out, thinking she's having hallucinations and stuff, and the whole time kind of more and more people are getting infected, and there's a panic, but so the show must go on in regards to this kind of fashion shenanigans. And anyway, that's kind of all I'll say about the plot here. So obviously the Soska sisters are well known for the movie American Mary, and they've had kind of like a bit of a cult following ever since then. And obviously Cronenberg, a very well respected horror auteur, and this movie actually references another kind of Cronenberg movie. There's actually a sequence which is directly influencing Dead Ringers. You'll know it when you see it. It's very bizarre and seemingly out of place. So what do we think of this movie? This is a difficult one because I feel there's going to be a lot of people who love this movie because it's so in-jokey. But at the same time, the tone of this movie is all over the place. But let me talk about what works first of all. So first of all, Laura Vandervoort, I actually think is pretty good in this movie. I think she does a great job of portraying this more shrew-like character at the beginning, the true kind of like despair, looking at her kind of like mangled face, and then when she kind of gets her makeup, she kind of gets this kind of vampy look. And I think she does a good job in regards to kind of the acting here. There's also some pretty decent kind of like gore effects here when we kind of see Rose's face and it's all kind of messed up. It's pretty horrific and they don't hold back, and there are some kind of bizarre effects as the movie progresses, all done in a kind of a practical manner. And obviously it being based on a Cronenberg original original movie and all that, there are some Cronenberg-esque style kind of like body horror elements to this as the movie kind of goes into the kind of the final act, which I think look pretty kind of revolting and kind of look quite disturbing and kind of at the same time. And I quite like the kind of the ramping up of the tension here. Obviously, as more people kind of get affected, we learn a little bit more about how it's going to affect in the kind of like the wider city and stuff like that. I also really like the relationship between Rose and kind of her best friend, who is his model, who is really kind of the only kind of person who's really kind of genuinely sort of kind to her and stuff like that. And there are some pretty good scenes of kind of like of attacks and things like that that I feel are effective. And the directorial style is strong here. I feel it definitely has a uniqueness, I think, that the Soska sisters kind of bring to it. But at the same time, it's kind of leads me into the negatives. I feel this movie's a little bit of a mess. The weird tonal shifts in this movie. Because sometimes, I mean, certainly in the kind of like, outside of the weird Zoolander intro, it takes itself pretty seriously. But then it goes into these moments of having a weird, without being a horror comedy, being like weirdly campy. And it just doesn't seem to kind of take itself seriously in some aspects. When for the rest of the movie, it kind of has been. So you have these weird kind of like tonal shifts. Character motivations just seem to just don't make sense. We have a kind of a love interest here, and without giving away spoilers, what's kind of revealed about that doesn't make a lick of sense to me, to be honest. So if you've seen the film, maybe I've missed something here, but it did not make sense when there is a reveal about that kind of character. There's also other logic issues here. I mean, we're meant to believe that Rose's character is going out and actually committing, unspeakable acts of violence and kind of biting people, but she's kind of like thinking, oh, it's a hallucination. But she's literally eating people, but there's no blood or anything like that, and it's just like that conveniently kind of forgotten about. So there's just kind of like little kind of silly logics that kind of don't, or lack of logic that don't make the movie kind of particularly cohesive. And then we kind of come to the final act, the last act of this movie. That it just goes a little bit batshit, to be quite honest. And I think some people will like that. But to me, it just seemed to kind of like throw everything in the, including the kitchen sink in the kind of like in the mix here. And it just seemed a little bit, I don't know, some of the kind of when we had the CDC kind of come involved in it and stuff like that, I was kind of interested. And I wanted to see more of the world with kind of people getting infected and stuff like that. But then we kind of go into the last section, and it just seems a little bit weird, kind of like tentacle monstery, and it doesn't really kind of give us much in regards to what the hell is going on. I mean, without going into spoilers, there's a little bit of dialogue towards the end which kind of hints to maybe, but I don't know. It just seemed to be a little bit bizarre for being bizarre's sake, if that makes sense. And there are other things that are unexplained. So it seems to be that it looks like that these kind of infected people seem to be honing in on Rose, but again, it's never really sort of touched on. It just seems to be, or either that, or they seem to be randomly just turning up wherever she is. So there's just things here that I feel needed to be expanded upon. I think that the script ultimately needed to be a little bit more, have another bit of a rewrite, and there needed to be more of a consistent tone within the movie. So, I mean, it is a fun film, I think, and there are some kind of, like, I think, a good, solid performance. Although, like I said, some of the direction here I wasn't so keen on, like, Rose's character looks more or less the same when she's all kind of, like, healed and beautiful. There's in the beginning, outside she's not wearing glasses. It's just ridiculous. Like, you needed to have more of an actual kind of shrew-like actress, I feel, to kind of really pull that off, because obviously Laura Vandervoort's an attractive woman, and you wasn't really getting this kind of vibe at the beginning. Wear foundation. She's got kind of like mottled skin, but wear foundation, god damn it. But she works in the fashion industry, I'm sure she's heard of it. So it's just kind of a little bit of a mess, to be honest with you, but a fun hot mess. I would say that. So should you watch it? I feel this movie will really appeal to some people, and some people who are big fans of the Soska sisters and who do make an appearance within the film, I feel will get a lot out of it. And there is, even outside of that, I think there are elements of this movie that you can enjoy. I wish it had gone a little bit kind of like, further with the kind of the world and the kind of like the expansion outside of the kind of our core characters. But it just seemed to have this weird, like, silly sense to it in the second half of the movie. Like, when there's for example, one mild spoiler here. There's a fashion show at the beginning, at the end of the movie, where one of the models is late, and then because she's been bitten by someone in the train, yet no one kind of questions it. but there was a massive public kind of health scare at this point where there's been reported that there's been rabies going on, and she's sweating and bleeding all over the place, and everyone's like, meh. It just doesn't make sense. It just seems like, shh, no one's going to bother about that. They just want to see gore. No one wants kind of like logic in their stories. Just brush over that and kind of, we'll have some kind of gory shots and people will love it. And some people may. But to me, coherency is a big thing. And I didn't feel this movie was particularly coherent. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. There are elements to enjoy. I think some people will really love it. Some people will be put off with the weird tonal shifts and the kind of the, quite frankly, nonsensical story here. Not as good as the original movie. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I know it was a great movie from what I do remember. I can't really give you too much of a comparison because it's been such a long time since I've seen the original Cronenberg version of RABID. But this one, based on its own merits, 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.